A new, vibrant fantasy world awaits, packed with powerful magical abilities, enchanted weapons, and towering Shadow of the Colossus-style bosses. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're sharing our review of Yellow Brick Games' third-person action-adventure title, Eternal Strands. Guys, Livid has been playing through Eternal Strands for a total of 45 hours now at the time of this review, and he's finished the entire campaign, nearly every side quest, collected every piece of armor and weapon alike, and maxed out anything that could be maxed out. Here's the headline. If you're a fan of games like Shadow of the Colossus, Breath of the Wild, and Immortals Phoenix Rising, there is a very good chance you'll enjoy Eternal Strands, Yellow Brick Games' first title. It's a high fantasy adventure that takes every opportunity within each quest to pull you deeper into the game's world and lore. There are a few rough edges, things we will definitely get into during this review, but still, Eternal Strands manages to stick the landing with an enjoyable narrative experience, a vibrant stylized game world, and unique abilities and physics-based interactions that make both combat and exploration fun. It's safe to say Livid enjoyed almost every second of his time with the game. Check it out. So where do we start? I think we have to answer the question, what exactly is Eternal Strands? If you've followed this game at all, the towering Shadow of the Colossus style enemies most likely caught your attention. The game centers around a singular, almost cataclysmic event known as the Surge, as well as the Enclave, an advanced center of magic in the world, renowned for pushing the limits of magic itself and creating magical humanoid constructs known as arcs. Unexpectedly, they seal themselves away from the rest of civilization behind what is thought to be an impenetrable barrier known as the Veil. With that, entire nations collapse and arcane disasters sweep over the world as raw magic energy threatens life itself for decades. Cheery stuff. Now, you and a band of weavers, potent magic users who make use of both sword and sorcery, find a way into the Enclave where you must survive a hostile land full of secrets and lost arcane knowledge. Even though that might sound a bit spoilery, like we're going deep into the narrative, one of the game's absolute high points is that setup is just the surface. Heck, you find all of that out within the first few minutes of the game, and from there, you'll dive into both main quests and side quests that seek to deepen your understanding of this new world the Yellow Brick team has created. That being said, we're not going to sugarcoat anything here. Initially, we were a bit put off that a majority of this narrative is revealed to the player in these still panels that juxtapose illustrations of the characters across from one another for each part of the conversation. You'll delve into various dialogue prompts to get a deeper understanding of everything in front of you, and even though none of them actually impact your story progression in a positive or negative manner, the amount of detail you can either consume or skip here is staggering. The team clearly cares about the new IP they've built, and we get it. Not every game can have AAA level cutscenes or animated 3D characters for every bit of exposition, but man, with how excellent the voice acting is in the game, we would have loved for this part of the game to deliver just a bit more.
The Enclave was once a safe haven for all weavers, and the pinnacle of innovation. Since the Veil went up, weavers took the blame for decades of war. Stories that put children to bed, preach the evils of our magic, all because of what happened here. We owe it to ourselves and to our brethren across the Maida to find out not just what happened, but why.
The team clearly chose to do what was cost-effective here, pouring a majority of their efforts into the game world, combat, enemy design, and more, things we know most players care about deeply. Throughout the world, you'll come across lore snippets called codex fragments, and in most games, these would just be collectibles with little to no impact on the game itself. But in Eternal Strands, you'll come to realize that every aspect of the game, all of its systems, are connected in some way. As you collect these codex fragments, you can take them back to Lane, the archivist in your Weaver band, who will assemble them into full pages for your codex. As you collect these in each region, you'll be able to see specific details about the region previously hidden to you. Now you might be wondering, why does that matter? Well, for one, you'll be traveling to each of these regions multiple times throughout your playthrough, and each time the weather, enemy composition, time of day, resources, and even the main boss will shuffle due to the arcane energy that is constantly in flux. What starts as a completely blind jump into the unknown becomes a calculated endeavor where you'll search for specific enemies, bosses, and resources to further your progression. For example, Glintwood Hollow, the first major region you get to explore in the game, is by default a lush forested region with winding rivers and runes strewn about. As you revisit this area over the course of the game, you'll encounter scorching droughts where even the tiniest bit of fire will set everything around you ablaze. Also, flash freezes will plunge the world into a harsh Arctic climate, and unless you're prepared to handle the frigid environment, you'll find yourself slowed, taking significant damage over time. On the other hand, miasma events will feature tangles, clouds of pure magical energy that cut off entire paths to areas, risking death just by trying to pass through them. Even the time of day can change things like enemy composition, the potency of specific enemies or boss abilities, and even access to unique resources or quest items. Collecting resources in the game can also get pretty nuanced and feed several important systems. For instance, enemies and even some resource nodes can become tempered through the use of flame or frost magic. This in turn can spawn entirely different resources, sometimes even legendary ones, and is essential to juice up your gear. One of the main uses for these resources is that you can salvage them with Chasmen to produce camp supplies, which you can use to upgrade the various stations back at your camp. Chasmen's Caravan provides you with more inventory slots and more slots in your pouch that are protected, allowing you to keep several resources from being lost if you die. When I say the game has a lot of resources, I mean that, and it's a decision you'll have to make early on in progression. What materials you're stacking up to bring back to camp, and what you're leaving behind. Camp is also where you can change up your equipment, since you're locked into your choice once you load into a region. You can still progress with a suboptimal loadout, don't worry, but it's just not ideal. Solus Forge allows you to craft more potent gear, which is needed to meet the increasing challenges as you progress through the game. You'll use resources you collect to craft these items, and each resource provides different stats to the finished product. Even better, the game lets you experiment via a dismantling and reforging system where you can get every resource invested into one piece of gear back so you can use it on something else or change the stats of the item in question. The game also features design recipes as hidden collectibles that expand your crafting options with Sola, and each of the weapons and armor pieces come with their own innate magical abilities that further augment your kit. For instance, one of the most insane weapon recipes we came across was the Kinetic Two-Hander. This weapon's ability allows you to physically launch yourself and an enemy you hit up into the air, and while the attack is cool, the movement tech it ends up providing really augments your gameplay. You're able to use this to launch yourself across chasms, up massive surfaces to reduce overall climbing time, dodge boss abilities, or even launch yourself onto a boss. More on that in a bit. Lane's Archive will grant you access to special resistance files that help further safeguard you from fire and frost, but it's here that you can also compile those codec pages I mentioned earlier. The cool thing about these, aside from unveiling information about each region at the Loom Gate prior to your next expedition, is that a lot of these codex pages, especially the Great Foe focused ones, provide valuable clues and information about hidden secrets and how to properly take down the massive boss enemies in each region. This is critically important because while you can simply kill these great foes through brute force and claim rare resources with each kill, they hide an even more important reason to kill them in the proper way. At Dom's Altiere, the last station available to you, you can weave new spells into your mantle and upgrade their potency by harvesting the Locus hidden on each boss. Yes, you heard me right, each boss is the key to progressing the potency of your magical abilities. You'll discover 9 abilities in total, tied directly to 9 great foes, and most of these were really well designed. Whether it's the Rhineland Sledgeworm and its use of kinetic-based magic to crush you, or the Highland Iceclaw's ability to blanket areas in bone-chilling frost, the various great foes are all really enjoyable fights. Every massive construct has a set of specific conditions that must be met before the Locus becomes exposed, and sometimes even more conditions before you can harvest it, instantly killing the boss in the process. We're talking shattering armor, freezing limbs in place, burning their fur off to diminish their protection. The list goes on, but we don't want to spoil this process for you in terms of what triggers each of these bosses' harvest conditions. Let me just tell you though, some of them really aren't straightforward, and Livid found himself genuinely scratching his head for quite a while with some of these. The codex pages for these enemies become essential in uncovering the truth about how to take these bosses down, and we thought that was awesome. Even though the fights are great, the combat in the game is a mixed bag. On one hand, the game is a giant physics-based playground. You can destroy most things in the environment and make use of them via kinetic magic, hurling them at your enemies. Hell, you can even pick up most enemies and throw them at each other, or launch them just into the abyss. Flame spells like Drake's Breath allow you to set both terrain and enemies ablaze, melt ice blocks in your path, or warm a room that would otherwise freeze you to death, but that is a double-edged sword since fire spreads and can quickly cause you harm as well. Frost spells such as Ice Wall pulls moisture from the air, allowing you to freeze enemies solid, put out fires, or even create bridges and ledges to aid in your traversal. You can even manipulate these frozen chunks of ice with your weapons or kinetic magic to devastating effect. Most of your abilities actually play into one another, allowing you to do some pretty wild combos on enemies that would make even a Breath of the Wild veteran giddy. Like I mentioned before, weapons get a bit nutty. We mentioned the kinetic two-hander, but things like the Frost Bow can create target-locking frozen projectiles, while the Flame Bow is an on-demand matchstick that can set pretty much whatever it hits on fire. Even the kinetic sword and shield allows you to suspend pretty much anything in front of you, object or foe alike, before launching them into the nearest wall or target of your choosing. You can play off these magical effects with your spells to devastating result because again, everything in the game is connected. Overall, the combat and traversal isn't exactly the smoothest. There's a bit of floatiness when moving and some noticeable delay jank in your attacks that make the hack and slash aspect of this game weaker. Yes, you have the ability to parry enemy attacks or dodge roll the safety, but the game features infuriating enemy design where they track you like a magnet even during a dodge. If that part of combat was a bit more polished, we'd feel a lot better about this aspect of the game, but here's hoping the developers can make some tweaks post-launch. Common enemies are also a mixed bag. Variety is just lacking, and the overall threat of death leaves us wanting a bit more. As it stands, there are 11 common enemies that you deal with across the entire game. That's not a lot, and a few are just different versions of the same thing with small differences. These get repetitive, and while some, such as the Ark of the Tower and Surgeborn Shades, become quite annoying to deal with, if you don't care about the resources that they drop, eating them off a ledge is always a viable option. Herein lies another double-edged sword with a physics-based game like Eternal Strands. Hilarious at first, but eventually becomes a way to cheese your way through areas you simply don't care about. It would have been nice to see enemies that flat out resist kinetic abilities, but that most likely went against some of the design pillars the developers set up for themselves. So overall, what did Livid think of Eternal Strands? Simply put, it's a thoroughly enjoyable narrative experience if you allow yourself to get immersed in the world and grind out all of the side companion quests. The combat is at a minimum refreshing, allowing you to just get kind of wacky with spell combinations and physic hilarities. The great foes are super fun and unique to overcome a couple times each, and figuring out how to properly take them down feels genuinely rewarding because they contribute so heavily to your character's progression. Finally, the various regions of the world and the secret gear recipes and randomized boss encounters really give you a reason to explore each zone multiple times under strikingly different conditions. The game makes an extremely strong impression for a new studio, and we recommend checking this one out if you have the chance. Friends, as always, we appreciate you checking out another video here on the channel. Of course, we'd love to know your thoughts on Eternal Strands once you've had the chance to play, so leave us a comment down below, and if you appreciate the work that went into creating this video, do us a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.